Morning and welcome to Ask the Expert, an award-winning daily series from 8:30 a.m. to 9 a.m. to help small businesses. If you have any questions, ask them in the comments of the live feed. If you need any more advice, join the official Intuit QuickBooks SMB community group on Facebook. Accountants and business experts are on hand 24/7. So during this live session, we'll be running a poll, so please do engage with it and I'll reveal the result at the end. So yeah, good morning, everyone. Hope you're well. I know 24 hours later, you're not still stressed from the fact that Facebook, Instagram, and what's the other one? WhatsApp was down. Hopefully you didn't have to do anything crazy, like, go for a walk or read a book. The internet won. So we're back online. So thank you very much if you're joining today. So my name is Nana Parry. I'm the founder of a company called Tectonic, and Tectonic helps businesses understand the true needs of their customers by finding the exact target customer, interviewing them or surveying them, and then analyzing the data to help businesses increase their sales, improve their marketing, or improve their product strategies. So I've been running, founder of Tectonic for about 5 years now. And actually a lot of my work when I first started the company was related to sales, especially B2B sales. And I didn't class myself as a salesperson by any means. As a founder of a small business, it is something, of course, that we need to do. But ultimately, I always look towards, some of the kind of American personalities who are very out there, very extroverted, sometimes very boisterous, and never found myself in that, in that ilk. But after finding my own style and actually realizing that some of the things I'm going to be talking about today are actually a form of, selling as well, I realized that I was able to come into my own and sell almost $1 million of our own products and services through some of the B2B sales techniques that I've learned. So today, I'm going to be sharing with you what some of those techniques and tips are. So the first one, I'm going to start with a little story. So when I was working in a big tech company, I was quite young. I was, had quite a large team, wasn't that experienced, and I really wasn't able to connect with my team that well. So I went to go to one of the executives for some advice. And one of the things, when I was talking to him about not being able to connect with my team, or they're not really, aligning with what I need them to do, he asked me one simple question, which was, so how many kids has Steve got? And I thought that was a strange question at the time, but I didn't know the answer. And he said, okay, what does Tony like to do on the weekends? Again, I didn't know the answer. And it triggered me to really understand that actually people within organizations in the B2B world, they're people first and they're the company representative second. So it's really important that even though the goal is to sell your services, either in the short term or in the long term, ultimately having an understanding that they're people first, and actually finding a common ground to connect with them, not necessarily related to the work that they're doing, but just in terms of their lives. Fortunately, I've had quite a few different experiences, whether it's traveling or whether it's living in other countries. So I find it a lot easier to connect with people across a broad spectrum, but have a go and see if you can connect with someone who you are ultimately trying to sell to, but actually it's about them being people first and reminding ourselves of that. So secondly, how well do you know the decision maker's job? And by that, I mean, we all have objectives in our roles, regardless of the organizations that we're in. We are all defined in a way by success. So what does success look like in those individual roles? One way to look at that is if you join actual webinars about the role. So not from a sales perspective to actually go in and try and sell anything, but just to absorb and understand what makes this role effective, what makes a good hire in this position. You could even talk to recruitment companies around what they look for when they're looking through CVs for this particular type of role, and what, again, defines success. And you can actually ask the individual that you're potentially selling to and speaking to what actually makes them successful, what makes them look good in front of their management. How do they actually get promoted. Some of these things can actually really help you position how you best sell your product and service to the role that you're trying to sell to, because you have an understanding of how what you're delivering actually links to the objectives that the individual has. That's another one. Just remember, how well do you know the decision maker's job? Have a look at job descriptions online as well. That's really useful for me. Okay, number 3, how much have you experienced your own product? So I do understand that sometimes it's not as simple as effectively experiencing your own product as a customer, but really, how well do you know your own product? Sometimes we find ourselves getting a bit, thinking that we know the product really, really well, when actually there's something really special about being on the receiving end of the product you're selling. You can identify areas in which the customer may actually have some questions, but also you can actually get behind the product a lot more if you have a great experience. So my recommendation is, depending on the space that you're in, if you are in a position to either experience the product as a customer, or you're actually able to sit with the product teams, sit with the consulting teams, the delivery teams, to actually understand what the product feels like to receive, that also holds you in great stead to be able to better sell your product. The next one, know your sales ecosystem. This is quite a broad one, but what I learned through trying to understand who the decision maker is, I realized that there are multiple players in any decision when it comes to B2B sales. So obviously you've got the customer being the individual that actually is able to sign off from a budget perspective, that they can buy the product or service. But then you've got the user, and the user may have absolutely no influence when it comes to the price, for example, but actually they are going to be the key user of the product. So actually sometimes it might make sense to leverage the understanding and create an evangelist from the user more so than the customer, depending on the type of product and service you're selling. Then you've also got people who are facilitators. They may not actually benefit from the sale directly. They may not actually be customers, but they could be within the organization facilitators of the sale, helping you bridge different departments or different people together to make the sale a bit more smooth. Then you've got the actual influencers themselves. So people who, again, may influence the sale, which is different to facilitate. They influence the sale because they know that in their job, even though they're not the customer, they're not the user, if this product or service is actually being used in the organization, they're more likely to achieve their own objectives or make their own lives easier as well. So recognize from your sales ecosystem where you should start. Should you really go straight to the target customer? Or should you actually be looking at some of these other influencers or other roles within the ecosystem to help you in the sales process? All right, so next tip. What about when you ask for the budget, but they don't give it to you? So this is something that I'm sure many of you have experienced. I experience it sometimes as well. But actually, I often now find that asking explicitly for the budget, especially early on, doesn't really work well. What I found is that, are there other questions or other things that you can understand about how the organization operates that allows you to infer, at least early on, from a range perspective, what that budget could be? So for example, you can ask them, how is the work that they're doing currently funded? If it's a specific project, or if they're looking to switch products and services, how is that actually being funded? Is it from, do they have to go and ask for money every time they want something? Do they have a yearly budget that actually they can do exactly what they want with? Do they have to get sign off, from multiple people as well? So trying to understand, how their budget works is a way to start to narrow down the broad, 0 to millions, to try and narrow it down. You could also ask questions like, when was the last time you actually invested in something like the product or service that you're looking to sell? Actually, there's a lot of great information there, because if it's 5 years ago, there could be more appetite to actually put further funds behind it. If it's something they did very recently, then maybe there could be more barriers there to that sale. But the point is, can you come up with a list of questions and ways to ask in a kind of non-direct way initially, just to allow you to start to gather where the budget could be, who it could be held with, because obviously we know customers can be quite reluctant to share the exact number. But over time, if you recognize that, they're people, you want to build trust and confidence, eventually through this work, you should be able to get the budget quite clear. All right, so another tip is to document the learning for each of your avatars. So for those of you that may not know what avatars are, customer avatars are, or customer personas, customer profiles, they are documents and views on who your target customer is. And ultimately, for the most part, marketing will likely want you to have one customer avatar, but in sales, it can be a bit different. You are likely to have multiple customer avatars. So really actually documenting them and focusing on what we call, 3 key things that will allow you to better understand who your customers are. So for example, what are the characteristics, the ones that we're used to, such as their role title, how long they've been in the organization, do they own the budget, yes or no, versus what we call traits. So traits are potentially due to the nature of who the individual is or their role or their interests. Actually, what are they more likely to do? What are they more inclined to do? So in the B2C world, we might say, if you are a millennial, you may be more likely to share your personal life on social media. But in the B2B space, there could be many things that span that. So are there any, is it attending webinars? Is it spending a lot of time on LinkedIn? These are traits that can help you understand the customer better. And then finally, you've got behaviors. Really, really important. What are the behaviors that people are exhibiting within these roles that can better allow you to frame whether they are your primary target customer or not? So in the B2C world, very easy. Are they going to the gym twice a week? Or are they going for a walk 3 times a week? In the B2B world, it could be many different things again, but thinking about your business and your role, what characteristics, traits, and behaviors do we believe those customers might have to actually be able to become customers in the real world? Okay, so another tip, know which value lever to pull and when. So what I mean by value lever is based on your product and service, the likelihood is that you will have different value propositions or different lead propositions that influence a different customer avatar more than the other. So for example, with Tectonic, we know that some people come to us because we're very good at finding their exact target customer because they're hard to reach in the world, but we have techniques that we use to actually go and find them, to actually speak to them, bring their barriers down and understand what their needs are. Some come to us for data analysis reasons. They're quite good at collecting the data, but analyzing it to get a customer persona that actually allows them to market their services and products effectively, they need us to help them with that. And some just need help with actually formulating the questions that need to be asked. So knowing that we have different value levers to pull based on understanding the people as they are, their jobs, their objectives, what makes them look good, what the issues are that they're trying to solve, we can then position the individual value lever appropriately. It doesn't mean that we're changing everything that Tectonic does, but we're able to position the value lever appropriately so that they can get the best out of our services. Okay, last couple of tips before I'll go to questions. So know your sales toolbox. There are many, many different sales techniques, but actually there are some things that you can draw on, whether that's articles that you can share, videos you can share, little snippets of information, all of these things to build trust, to build confidence, and to actually show that you're actually aligned with what the customer actually needs. Those are, I think, 7 or 8 tips there, quite a lot. I'm going to go into some questions now. Hopefully some of those were useful. Okay, so first question from Amelia on Instagram. Morning, Nana. What's the best way to analyze or discover new markets and whether your business is ready to enter it? Thank you, Amelia, for the question. So there's a couple of things here. First of all, the first beginning part is actually understanding your strategy. So I'm making an assumption around what your strategy might be, and that you've got that quite clear. But actually, you need to make sure you first, before analyzing new markets, your business actually has a clear intended strategy of where they want to operate and where they'd like to grow. Then we call what we do is we create what we call strategic outcomes. So basically, what are these unknowns strategically that you might have that make it a lot easier for your business if you actually knew the answer to those questions? So, for example, if you're in the health space, you might have a strategic question around do people in Peru use smartwatches? Yes, we may know that. No, we may not. But actually, it's understanding if you have the clear answer, objective answer to that strategic question, then you'll be in a better position to start to analyze these new markets and make sure that the information that you're trying to gather is actually aligned to the unknown that you're trying to find out. In terms of whether your business is ready for it or not, I think different people will have different perspectives on it. My view is that really try and make sure at least you know very clearly what your value proposition is, why customers are buying from you, who those target customers are, and the different nuances in which they may buy or not buy your product or service. By understanding that first at a core and proving that you understand that through the kind of revenue that you're generating from your product and service sales, then I think you're in a better position to start considering other markets before potentially, going really, really broad early on, and you're still trying to figure out who your actual customer is. So hopefully that answers that question for you. Next question is from Kathy on Facebook Messenger. It's the early days of my business and I'm still figuring out how to divvy up the income. Is there a general rule on how much profit I should take home versus how much should be reinvested back into my business? Yeah, really, really interesting question, Kathy. Thank you for asking it. So there's no hard and fast rule around how much profit you should take out and how much should be reinvested back in the business. Ultimately, like most of these things, when you're a small business owner, it's aligned to what are your own personal needs? What are your own personal goals? What's the reason for you having the business in the first place? Is it, to be able to extract money out of so you can invest in other areas? Is it actually your lifelong dream to own the business that you have and you want to continue it for decades to come? Is it because you want to exit the business as soon as possible? So actually this self-awareness allows you to better frame some of those decisions. So there is no hard and fast rule, but it's very common in the early days to focus on reinvesting back into the business, mainly because, if you have the cash and the capital to be able to do that, then you're more likely to achieve your objectives quicker, because we can't deny that money is useful when actually looking to grow your business. But importantly, though, remembering that you as the business owner or your partners as the business owners, you have to be whole for your business to exist. You have to be able, you have to cover rent or mortgage, you have to eat, you have to be able to sleep well, you need a little bit of a social life. So making sure that you're whole as an individual is really, really important, to not go excessive, but recognize the needs that you have. Again, that will help determine how much you would take as income versus how much you may leave in the business to reinvest. So hopefully that answers your question. All right, next question from Evan on Twitter. So any advice on how to upsell to current clients without scaring them off? Yeah, that's a really good question. So a lot of what I talked about earlier was really around kind of new customer acquisition, but it's a really, really good point that it's much easier to sell to current clients rather than to acquire new ones. Reason being obvious, they've already seen the value that you provide, they're already familiar with you, they already trust you in ways. So actually being able to leverage that is really important. For me, when it comes to upselling to current clients, I try, first of all, not to use the word upsell, because sometimes it forces something that may actually not be there. So what I like to talk about is, what other opportunities or what other value could we provide to the client in their ecosystem. So one of the ways to do it without scaring them off is actually what we do is regular check-ins with the customer, not to actually sell anything to them in those check-ins, but really to continually get an understanding of the experience they're having today with the products and services, but also how they could actually, how we can frame an understanding of, in the bigger picture, why they're using these products and services overall. Because most of the time, especially in the B2B space, what we're providing is a part of an entire business that allows them to achieve their goals. So by really understanding earlier on, whilst you're doing these check-ins, what are their actual goals? What are they struggling with as a business out of interest? But also to see if there are opportunities where actually the services that you provide could actually help them there as well. But also, depending on your product and service, it may be something that you need to do on a recurring basis because it actually provides a lot more value to the client as well. So sometimes we talk about bringing in someone that they could speak to, that have experienced our services regularly, to see how that value may translate to them. But also it's about really the scaring them off part. You really shouldn't scare them off if you've done the work up front, where they actually understand that you're a person, you understand that they're people, they actually have different interests, and they actually, it's true that people do buy from people. So if you've done that work, the likelihood is that you won't scare them off. They might just say, not interested, and that's fine. But we want to move away from this kind of transactional B2B selling. We want to focus more on, relationship building selling, moving with the individual as they either move up the organization or move across to another company, and building that relationship for our products and services to increase our likelihood of sales. That was a very long answer, but hopefully that answered that question for you. Okay, next question from Katie on Facebook Messenger. So we have a few clients who buy a lot of licenses from us for our product in one go. So when it comes to renewing those licenses, they often treat it like a negotiation. How should we be preparing for this? Another really, really great question. So when it comes to license types of purchases, it's very common, depending on the organization, if they have a procurement team, or if they just feel like, depending on, that's just how they do business, it's very common for people to want to, renegotiate. And maybe we would do the same things, in a B2C world as well. In terms of preparing for it, so there are things such as objective handling. So this is, for example, depending on what the customer may or may not say, or some of the issues they may have with renewing at the same price, you're actually already prepared up front with what we call objective handling. So if they were to say X, Y, Z, how would we respond in this way? Not as a defensive way. It's very important to not be defensive, but actually to show that the value that you're providing is in line with the market, is in line with how their organization works today, etc. So having some of these objective handling pieces there is really useful. Obviously, if there are things that are actually affecting their budget, but they really, really want to work with you, obviously some of the prep has to be the financial aspect, right? You know what margin you're selling at, what gross margin, net margin you hope to get per product and service you buy. You should know how much it costs for you to acquire a new customer, how much it costs for you to retain a customer, how much, marketing to existing customers actually costs. So some of the preparation will have to be in the finances, because ultimately there will be numbers that you can't actually go down to as a result of the nature of your products or services. And hopefully through the work that we've done earlier with the relationship building with the client, they'll get an understanding of that. And it's really about being fair. Sometimes we'll ask, what would you do in this situation? If it becomes a bit sticky, we'll say, what do you think is fair in this situation, to see if we can get any productive conversations going in that space as well. So hopefully that answers your question there about licensing and renegotiation. Okay, so we've got a question from Joe on Twitter. So how do you decide if a marketing strategy should be continued or stopped? I'm talking of strategies that are still delivering results. Yeah, really interesting question. And unfortunately, like a lot of this stuff, there's no hard and fast rule to saying that, okay, we should stop at this point. But ultimately, when you said they're delivering results, the first question that comes to my mind is exactly what metrics are being tracked. So yes, they may be bringing in sales, but if you compare your cost of acquiring a customer to your expected lifetime value of what revenue or income that customer will provide you, that's a key metric to be able to actually consider whether these results are really working or not. Again, by being able to focus on sales conversion, so when they become prospects versus when they become actual clients, some of those metrics will be really important. So I'm assuming that you mean that all those metrics are fine. So one argument is, why stop? If they are working, maybe they're too expensive, which is a separate thing. But if they are working, there is a question as to, why actually stop? What's the reason that you would consider stopping? But secondly, there may be ways to analyze, over 2 or 3 months, what has been successful in that strategy, and then actually look to determine if there is a way to extract that value that you're creating through that strategy, and then actually use that information to create a new strategy, which is maybe less costly, but actually more effective. So hopefully that answers that question for you. And Millie on Facebook Messenger, I'm aware the majority of B2B buyers these days like to conduct their own research and are put off by speaking directly to salespeople. What could we do to improve the information that is out there to increase our chances? Really good question. And actually a large reason of why Tectonic exists is because sometimes people are a little bit apprehensive talking to salespeople, because the term just makes it very clear that the goal is to sell to them. And one of the ways to do that is actually looking at different elements of research that actually just could be valuable to them as a business. My approach is more focusing on understanding them as a business rather than the focus being able to sell. Because what we don't want to do is push a square peg in a round hole. It's all about being able to provide the value that you can. And by looking at industry research can be really useful, but also actually just reaching out to people and just say, look, looking to ask you some questions. We have some insights from other people that we think would be valuable to you. Maybe some of the insights we have could be interesting. It'd be really great to hear your opinions on it. So using words like getting opinions, getting insights, valuable advice, some of these things can really help to kind of reduce some of those barriers to actually get people to engage with you. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question. So the poll results that we talked about earlier on are in, and we asked you, how difficult was it to identify your customers' needs? Very important part of the sales process. 0% of you said easy, unsurprising. 20% of you said moderate, and 80% answered difficult. That makes a lot of sense. Extracting customer needs in an unbiased way is actually really, really difficult. It does take a lot of practice, a lot of time to better understand how to position things. But hopefully through some of the tips I gave today, they're a little bit less direct and a bit more understanding the people as a whole that can help you get a better view of what those needs could be. Okay, so coming to the end of the show, thank you all for tuning in, really appreciate it. If you do want to get in contact with me, you can send me a message on LinkedIn under the name Nana Parry, that's NanaParry. And coming up on Ask the Expert tomorrow is Johan Gori, Managing Director of On Point Accounting Group. So you can tune in to get advice on accounting and the latest features and tools that will make your bookkeeping easier. So thank you again. Really, really enjoyed answering all your questions and giving you those tips. And yeah, have an amazing day.